Good morning. My name is Rhonda DeBoe. I'm the Sholom Hospice volunteer and bereavement coordinator. And I'm here this morning talking to our hospice chaplain, Rabbi Sharon Stiefel. And today we're going to talk about coping with grief during the holidays. So good morning, Rabbi Stiefel, and thank you for joining us.
Hi. Thank you.
The first thing that I wanted to talk about this morning is the first year after a loved one dies can be really rough when it comes to the holidays. What advice have you got to give us about that?
Yeah, I think well, first, we just need to acknowledge that it's not just holidays, but it can be birthdays, anniversaries, maybe other special days you shared. And we have memories that serve as a constant reminder of our loss. It can be painful and overwhelming to watch other people celebrate, and particularly so in the first year after death. And that's when we need to develop new holiday rituals and traditions. So, as I said, I think that the first step is acknowledging that this season is going to be difficult. And sometimes the anticipation of the holiday can be more difficult than the day itself.
We live in a society that doesn't always honor people's sadness. People assume that after a year or after a certain amount of time, you're done grieving, and they want to move away from it. They want you to move away from it. So what advice would you have for people who might hear either directly or indirectly that it's been long enough and it's time to move on?
Well, first, I think we know that grief is a lifelong process, and you need to give yourself time. It doesn't fit into neat containers. The grieving process doesn't conclude after 6 months or even a year. Depending on the strength of the bond, grief can be lifelong. I often say, the amount of grief often mirrors the amount of love. And nonetheless, grief does usually soften and change over time. So while you're going to be like this for a while, or for the time being, over time, the holidays will become easier to handle as your grief changes and evolves. It's important to talk to your loved ones and educate them. For example, you could say, I would love it if it would be okay for me to express to you what I'm going through. And they might be, a little bit scared of, I won't know what the right thing to say is. And you can tell them they don't have to say anything back, just to be there for you. We want others to intuitively know what we want. And most people in our lives are not telepathic.
What strategies do you have for somebody who's feeling overwhelmed?
Well, first of all, really, there are no shortcuts. You have to give yourself an opportunity to grieve and walk through it. You really can't fake where you're at. You need to accept it and enter into it. But nonetheless, we really need to take care of ourselves, and using alcohol to self-medicate your mood is not optimal. It's not even recommended. Physical exercise is often an antidote for depression. Being able to take a walk outside can be really helpful. Writing in a journal can be a good outlet for your grief. Reaching out to others, because the tendency is to want to isolate yourself. And so talking to other family members, and if you need, seeking out professional care.
Often people who are going through grief want to isolate and pull the covers over their heads and stay there. What advice have you got for those people?
Well, again, I think it's very important to plan in advance. You may feel worse if you're isolated. You may feel sad either way. You can be sad and lonely, or sad and with other people. You can ask someone to give you a call. And on the other hand, too, there may be somebody that needs your help, and reaching out to them and providing support to them can make you feel like you have a little bit more purpose.
So we're in a pandemic right now, and isolation is recommended. How does that fit in with this?
Well, holidays can be a time of a lot of stress, and losing a loved one adds to the stress, and celebrating during a pandemic adds even more stress. So everybody's feeling lost, that things can't be the way they were. And celebrating a holiday over Zoom is not ideal. So you need to set realistic expectations for yourself and give yourself permission to limit your Zoom attendance if that's what you need.
How about ritual? Can you give us, how can ritual be a help to us?
Well, I think there are many ways in which ritual helps us stay connected with our loved ones. For example, there's a way in that I start my Passover Seder. When I was growing up, our family used the same Haggadah, which is the book used at the Passover Seder every year. And my father of blessed memory always led the Seder by reading the opening lines of this particular Haggadah, the Silverman Haggadah. I'm just going to read them to you. He would say, "Welcome to our Seder. Tonight we observe a most ancient, colorful, and significant festival. The Seder takes us back to those events which occurred more than 3,000 years ago." So wherever I am, if I'm leading a Seder or attending a Seder, my father and those words are with me, which is to say that when someone we love dies, our relationship with them doesn't have to. I think it's also important, though, to address the elephant that's in the room in regard to some rituals. You may be asking yourself, who's going to carve the turkey? Or for Hanukkah, who's going to fry the latkes? Or for Passover, who's going to lead the Seder? And when you change the traditions, there may be some losses, but there may be some gains. For example, if your father always led the Seder, but this year his granddaughter is leading it, you can feel proud that the generations are carrying on the tradition.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I want to say a little bit more about how our relationship with our loved one who has died hasn't ended. It's just changed. The relationship continues, and we enter into a new relationship with a loved one. And it's up to us to continue their stories and to bring our loved ones back to our festive tables. The power of the story is that it transcends physical mortality. It allows for the continuation of our loved one's presence in our lives, and it keeps our relationships with them important and vital. Having said that about the relationship not ending, I also want to emphasize that we really need to allow ourselves to feel all of our feelings, whether that be joy, sadness, anger, and really allow ourselves to grieve, and recognize that every family member has his or her own unique grief experience. You could look at another family member and say, oh, they are so different from me. And it can be that way. No one's way is right or wrong. And also remember that experiencing joy and laughter during a time of grief doesn't mean that you've forgotten your loved one.
What advice do you have to somebody who's maybe feeling a little too overwhelmed, or not feeling like they're staying on top of their grief?
Yeah, I think that's important to know, that you can always reach out. You can reach out to clergy you might have a relationship with. You can reach out to mental health professionals. You can reach out to our Sholom Hospice bereavement team. We have professionals. We have a support group. We have bereavement groups. We have doula volunteers. And we can also make referrals.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning and giving us this information, Rabbi. I think it's a very topical as we head into the solstice and the more darker time when people can have a tendency to feel sadness. Thank you for your words.
Thank you.